I stand alone in the bridal suite at Willamette Valley Vineyard, staring at my reflection in the full-length mirror. My wedding dress fits perfectly, every seam and crystal exactly where it should be. The makeup artist outdid herself. My eyes look wider, my cheekbones more defined, my lips the perfect shade of rose. But the silence in the room isn't peaceful. It is heavy, like a physical weight pressing against my chest. I check my phone for the 15th time. No texts, no calls, no frantic voicemails explaining a flat tire or a wrong turn, just a blank screen staring back at me. Downstairs, in the front row, 3 chairs sit empty. My father's, my mother's, and my brother's. For a moment, I try to invent excuses, but then the cold truth settles in. This isn't a mistake, it is a choice. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. It wasn't a car accident, it wasn't a medical emergency. I found out the truth 3 hours after I said I do, while Justin was holding my hand under the reception table. My mother had texted a cousin, who showed me the screen with a sympathetic wince. They were at a tech summit in San Francisco. My brother, Hunter, had secured a last-minute speaking slot, a TED-style talk, where he was going to pitch his revolutionary crypto gaming platform. He was convinced he was the next tech messiah, and my parents, Gregory and Angela, were his devout disciples. They chose the hypothetical possibility of his fame over the concrete reality of my happiness. They picked a gamble over a guarantee. I remember watching the video of his talk weeks later. It was a disaster. He was arrogant, unprepared, and the room was half empty. But in that bridal suite, and during the years that followed, the message was clear. I was the safe bet, the boring daughter, the one who didn't need tending. Hunter was the high-risk, high-reward asset. They bet everything on him. 5 years later, the silence between us had hardened into a permanent cold front. I sat at the head of a mahogany table in a glass-walled conference room in Austin, staring at a document that felt heavier than its paper weight. The representatives from the European conglomerate sat across from me, their pens poised. I looked at the final figure on page 42. $45 million. My hand didn't shake when I signed my name. It was a strange feeling, becoming wealthy in the stroke of a pen. But the irony wasn't the money, it was how I made it. I didn't invent a flashy app or a crypto scheme. I designed sustainable, modular, affordable housing. My firm, Root Architecture, specialized in what my father called mud huts for the help. He used to laugh at my blueprints, asking why I wasted my degree on low-income aesthetics instead of chasing luxury commissions. He didn't understand that service scales better than ego. While Hunter was burning through their retirement funds trying to launch lifestyle brands that nobody wanted, I was in the mud. Literally and figuratively. I was on construction sites at dawn, wearing steel-toed boots, arguing with contractors, and obsessing over thermal insulation. I built an empire on the very values they mocked: utility, humility, and sustainability. Congratulations, Jasmine, the lead investor said, shaking my hand. You've built something that will change how this city lives. I looked around the room at my team, 12 people who had slept in the office with me during crunch times, who had believed in the mission when we couldn't make payroll. They were cheering, popping a bottle of champagne that cost $50, not $5,000. My phone sat on the table, face up. No texts from Mom. No proud of you from Dad. They didn't even know this meeting was happening. I realized then that my success felt so substantial, precisely because it was heavy with dirt and sweat. It wasn't a gift. It wasn't an inheritance. It was a fortress I had built brick by brick, and for the first time in my life, I knew that the walls were high enough to keep them out. I drove a muddy Ford F-150 for 6 years. It held my drafting tubes, my hard hat, and the endless samples of recycled timber I carted between sites. It was practical. It was honest. But you cannot hunt sharks with a fishing net. You need blood in the water. And in my family, blood looks like luxury. I knew that my acquisition news might filter down to them eventually through the grapevine, but gossip is easily dismissed. Visuals are not. I needed something undeniable, something that screamed liquid assets. I walked into the dealership on a Tuesday morning, wearing my site boots and a flannel shirt. The salesman looked past me, scanning the lot for a husband or a father who might actually be the buyer. I walked straight to the center of the showroom floor. "That one," I said, pointing to the McLaren Artura Spider. It was a violent shade of blue, low to the ground, aggressive, and utterly impractical. It was the visual opposite of everything I stood for. "That's a performance vehicle, miss," the salesman said, his tone dripping with that specific brand of condescension men reserve for women in hardware stores and car lots. "The price point is $295,000, I interrupted. "I know. I'll wire the full amount now. I want to drive it off the lot in an hour." Watching his expression shift from dismissal to greed was a small, petty appetizer for the main course I was about to serve. I signed the papers without a loan, without a cosigner, without calling anyone for permission. When I got it home, I parked it in the driveway next to Justin's station wagon. It looked ridiculous. It looked like a spaceship landed in a vegetable garden. I took exactly one photo. The afternoon sun hit the metallic paint, making it shine like a jewel. I posted it to Instagram with a caption that was short, sharp, and designed to draw blood. "Built, not bought." Then, I waited. Silence is a heavy thing when you are waiting for it to break. For 3 days, nothing happened. No likes from my mother, no jealous comments from Hunter, just the digital void. But I knew how they operated. They were discussing it. They were running the numbers. They were checking the background of the car to see if it was a rental. They were verifying the kill. On Wednesday afternoon, my phone lit up on my desk. Mom calling. I stared at the screen. I hadn't seen that name pop up in 5 years. Not when I graduated. Not when I launched the firm, not when I got married. My stomach didn't drop. It tightened, like a muscle preparing for impact. I let it ring 4 times before sliding my thumb across the screen. "Hello, Jasmine." Her voice was unrecognizable. The cold, clipped tone she used to reserve for me, the tone that said "you are taking up too much space," was gone. In its place was a breathless, frantic warmth. It was the voice she used for her country club friends. It was the voice of a woman who wanted something. "Mom," I said, "it's been a long time." "Too long," she rushed, bypassing the awkwardness of half a decade of neglect. "Your father and we saw your post. The car. It's stunning. We realized we've let too much time pass. We need to see you." "I'm busy, Mom. My schedule is, it's important." She cut in. And there it was, the edge of desperation. "We need to have a family meeting. Tomorrow. At the lake house. Hunter will be there. We need to discuss the future." The future. Code for money. They didn't want to see me. They wanted to see the wallet that could buy a McLaren on a Tuesday. The car had done its job. It was a shiny lure, and the predators had finally broken the surface. "Tomorrow at 2, I said. "I'll be there." I hung up and looked at the phone. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel loved. I felt the cold satisfaction of a scientist who has just confirmed a hypothesis. They were exactly who I thought they were. The drive to the lake house took 45 minutes. Enough time to listen to a podcast, enough time to call Justin, enough time to change my mind. But I didn't turn around. I drove in silence, letting the engine's hum vibrate through the steering wheel. I needed to get my head right. I needed to stop thinking like a daughter. A daughter goes to a family meeting hoping for an apology. A daughter hopes that maybe, just maybe, they saw the car and realized they had missed out on knowing an incredible person. A daughter hopes for love. But I wasn't going there as a daughter. I was going there as a creditor. I started doing the math in my head, not the financial math, but the psychological accounting. I called it the narcissistic math. It's a formula I'd been working on for years to explain how my parents operated. In their ledger, I didn't exist as an independent entity. I was an asset they had invested in by giving birth to me. They viewed my autonomy as a form of theft. My success wasn't mine. It was a return on their investment that I was withholding. They didn't see themselves as beggars asking for money. They saw themselves as owners coming to collect dividends. This was why they felt no shame. You don't feel shame when you withdraw money from your own bank account. And to them, that's all I was. An account that had finally matured. Understanding this killed the last flickering ember of hope in my chest. It was brutal. but it was clarifying. If I walked in there expecting them to act like parents, I would be destroyed. But if I walked in there expecting them to act like shareholders in a failing business, I could handle it. I pulled up to the gate. The lake house was a modern monstrosity. A glass box designed by a famous architect who hated privacy. It was all sharp angles and floor-to-ceiling windows, designed to look impressive from the water but impossible to live in comfortably. I parked the McLaren next to my father's aging Mercedes. The contrast was violent. My car looked like the future. His looked like the past trying to hold on. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. No tears. No softness. Just the hard, polished surface of a woman who knows exactly what she is worth. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and stepped out into the heat. I wasn't walking into a home. I was walking into a negotiation. I walked up the floating concrete steps to the front door. I didn't knock. I waited. It was a power move I'd learned in boardrooms. Make them open the door. Make them invite the wolf in. Gregory opened it. My father looked smaller than I remembered. The expensive linen shirt hung loose on his frame, and there were deep lines etched around his mouth that no amount of Botox could fill. He didn't smile. He didn't hug me. His eyes flicked over my shoulder to the McLaren in the driveway, lingering on the badge for a second too long before returning to my face. "Jasmine," he said. It wasn't a greeting. It was an acknowledgement of presence. "Gregory," I replied. He led me into the main living area. The glass box lived up to its name. The afternoon sun was magnifying the heat through the triple-paned windows, making the air feel stagnant and recycled. My mother, Angela, was sitting on a white B&B Italia sofa that looked like it had never been sat on. She stood up too quickly when I entered, her bracelets jingling nervously. And then there was Hunter. My brother was pacing by the fireplace, looking like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His tech visionary uniform black t-shirt, jeans, blazer, looked disheveled. There was a desperate energy radiating off him, a frantic vibration that I recognized instantly. It was the smell of fear. "You made it," Hunter said, his voice tight. "Nice car." "Rental?" "Owned outright," I said, not breaking stride. "Let's sit." I took the chair at the head of the table, usually reserved for my father. It was petty, but it felt good. Gregory hesitated, then sat to my right. Angela perched on the edge of the sofa like a bird ready to take flight. "So," I said, placing my phone face down on the table. "You called a family meeting." "I'm here. What do you want?" "It's not about wanting," Angela started, her voice trembling with that practiced fragility she used to get her way. "It's about family. We've been estranged." "It's not right. We haven't been estranged, Mom. You've been absent. There's a difference." I looked at Hunter. Cut the preamble. "Why am I here?" Hunter stopped pacing. He looked at Gregory, then back at me. He picked up a thick folder from the coffee table and slid it across the glass surface. It stopped right in front of me. I opened it. It wasn't a peace offering. It was an autopsy report of their financial lives. Foreclosure notices on the glass box, default letters on Hunter's business loans. A terrifying amount of leverage on a crypto margin account that had clearly gone to zero. They were bleeding out. "We need a bridge loan," Hunter said, trying to sound like a CEO pitching a Series B round instead of a failure begging his sister, just to stabilize the assets. "The market turned on us, but I have a new venture launching in Q3 that will cover everything." "You're broke," I said, closing the folder. "We are illiquid," Gregory corrected sharply. "There is a difference. We have assets." "The South Acre." My head snapped up. The South Acre was the crown jewel of the estate, a pristine stretch of waterfront land that had been in the family for generations. It was untouched, wild, and beautiful. "We have a developer lined up," Hunter said, his eyes gleaming with a manic hope. "Luxury condos, high density. They're offering $8 million for the land. But we can't sell it until we clear the liens on the main house. We need you to pay off the bank, so we can sell the South Acre and get liquid again." They wanted me to pay their debts, so they could destroy the last beautiful thing this family owned. They wanted to pave paradise to pay for their mistakes. "You want me to invest in your failure," I said slowly. So you can sell the family legacy to a condo developer? It's just land, Jasmine, Angela said, waving her hand dismissively. It's just dirt. We're talking about our survival. I looked at them, really looked at them. They were vampires. They had drained everything dry, their savings, their reputation, their relationships, and now they were looking at me, not as a daughter, but as a fresh vein. No, I said. Hunter's face turned purple. What do you mean, no? You have the money. We saw the acquisition news. You have $45 million sitting in a bank account, and you're going to let us drown? I didn't say I wouldn't do anything, I said, reaching into my bag. I said I wouldn't do that. I pulled out a single, crisp document. It wasn't a check, it was a deed. You can't sell the South Acre, Hunter. Because you don't own it. The silence in the glass box was absolute. Even the hum of the over-engineered air conditioning seemed to stop. Hunter blinked, his mouth slightly open. Gregory frowned, confusion warring with his usual arrogance. What are you talking about? Gregory asked. That land has been in the family trust for 40 years. It was, I corrected. Until Grandma Eleanor removed it. I slid the deed across the table. It was a copy, obviously. The original was locked in a safe deposit box, but the seal was unmistakable. Grandma Eleanor knew you, Gregory. She knew you'd leverage everything you had to chase status. So, before she died, she carved out the South Acre. She put it in a separate trust. A trust in my name. Angela reached for the paper, her hands trembling. This isn't possible. We would have known. You didn't know because you didn't care, I said. You were too busy flying Hunter to crypto conferences and buying boats you couldn't afford. Grandma told me the day I graduated college. She said, one day, they will come for everything. Keep this safe. Hunter snatched the paper from Angela. He scanned it, his eyes darting back and forth. Then he looked up, and for the first time, I saw true terror. You own it, he whispered. You actually own it. I do. Then sign it over, he screamed, slamming his hand on the table. You have $45 million. You don't need this land. We need it. Sign it over so we can sell it and save the house. I'm not keeping it, I said calmly. What? Gregory asked. I'm not keeping the land. I reached into my bag again. And I'm not giving it to you. I pulled out a second document. This one was glossy, professionally printed, a press release. This morning, I transferred the deed to the South Acre to a non-profit organization I founded. It's called the Green City Housing Trust. I watched the words sink in. I'm donating the land, I continued, my voice steady. And I'm endowing the trust with $30 million of my own money. We break ground next month. We're going to build 100 units of sustainable, affordable housing for teachers, nurses, and service workers, right here, right next to your glass box. You can't. Angela gasped. Low-income housing? Here? It will ruin the property values. Exactly, I said. It will destroy the exclusivity you prize so much. You wanted to sell my legacy to a condo developer to save your vanity? I'm using my legacy to house the people you look down on. I stood up. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt lighter than air. The press release went out an hour ago, I said. The mayor is already tweeting about it. It's done. The money is gone. The land is gone. There is nothing left for you to take. Hunter looked like he was going to be sick. Gregory just stared at me, his face gray. He realized, finally, that he had lost. He hadn't just lost the money. He had lost the war. Why? He croaked. Why would you do this to your own family? Because you're not my family, I said. You're just people who share my DNA. My family are the people who show up. The fallout was immediate and absolute. Within 20 minutes of me leaving the driveway, the news broke. My team had coordinated the press release perfectly. Local architect donates prime waterfront estate for affordable housing, a $30 million gift to the city. The headlines were everywhere. By evening, the story wasn't just local news. It was a national conversation about wealth, responsibility, and the housing crisis. I was hailed as a visionary. The mayor called to personally thank me. But for my parents, the narrative was different. The media loves a hero, but they love a villain even more. It didn't take long for investigative journalists to dig into why the land was donated so abruptly. Court records of the foreclosure proceedings on the glass box surfaced. Hunter's failed business filings were exposed. The public connected the dots. The wealthy family in the glass mansion wasn't just broke. They were the greedy neighbors who had tried to block affordable housing for years, now forced to live next to it by their own daughter. They were humiliated. The country club memberships were quietly revoked. The gala invitations stopped coming. Hunter's creditors, smelling blood in the water, moved aggressively to seize whatever assets remained. The glass box was sold at auction 3 months later, for pennies on the dollar. I drove past the site 6 months later. The glass box was still there, looking empty and sad, but next to it, the construction cranes were already rising. The Green City Housing Trust was real. It was concrete, and steel, and hope. I saw my parents one last time. They were walking out of a lawyer's office downtown, arguing. They looked older, smaller, diminished. They saw my car, the McLaren, stopped at the traffic light. Our eyes met. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I didn't feel the need to honk or wave or shout. I just felt peace. I had cut them off. It sounds violent, like an act of aggression, but in that moment, watching them fade into the background of my rearview mirror, I realized it wasn't an attack. It was a medical procedure. I had amputated a gangrenous limb to save the rest of the body. It was painful, yes. It left a scar. But I was alive. I was healthy. And I was free. I pulled up to the construction site. Justin was there, wearing a hard hat, talking to the foreman. He smiled when he saw me, a genuine, unforced smile that reached his eyes. "Ready to see the foundation?" he asked. "I am," I said. We walked onto the site together. The ground was messy, chaotic, full of noise and potential. It wasn't perfect. But it was ours. And for the first time in my life, I knew that whatever we built here would last. If you've ever had to make the hard choice to cut off a toxic family member to save your own peace, you are not alone.